Today is day 56, and I decided to read the Bible from cover to cover. So today is day 56, and we're going to be talking about blood and sex today. The rules guiding sex according to the book of Leviticus. So I chose to use the daily Bible reading guide, and every day we go through an Old Testament reading, a New Testament reading, a Psalm, and the Proverbs. If that's too much for you, just find a simpler one that follows the Bible chapter from chapter and read it through to the end. But this is so that I can know God for myself, draw my own interpretations, lessons, insights, and let them guide my own life and my choices. You may not always agree with my interpretation, and that's fine. In fact, that's even what I want, so that you can go read it for yourself. Today is day 56, and we're just going to be looking through the books of. So we're going to be we're going to be finishing Leviticus chapter 16 and reading it right through to. Okay, so we're going to be reading 16, 17, and 18, chapter 16, 17, and 18 Leviticus. We're going to be reading Mark, Psalms 41, and Proverbs 10. Proverbs 10. Two scriptures, two verses of scriptures. Okay, so when we get there, we'll break it down. Because we're talking about what God feels about blood and sex, how to have sex. You know, how many of you knew that there were rules that Moses gave the Israelites on how to have sex? Okay, so today I put in the title here in my notes that God basically, so I lifted that out of the middle of the I think in chapter 17 or so, and said God stresses that they must live a life differently from the Egyptians where they left, that's your past, and live a life different from the way you're going to your future, the Canaanites, the land of the promised land. I'm gonna set for you a whole new set of rules about everything: how to dress, how to talk, how to eat. Now today we're going to be talking about how to have sex. Okay, so before we do that, Leviticus 16 lists, there are four things that stood out to me here. It talks about animals for sacrifice. If you recall, with the last okay, so every day I say recall, right? We've been talking about sacrifices, but moving away gradually from sacrifices. You know, so basically he's tying it up now by saying, do not kill animals for sacrifices in the field. If you remember, there's a whole ritual coming to the tent of meeting, dipping your hand in the blood when the priest has atoned, and all of that, so sprinkling it, some really spooky stuff. I was telling my husband that, you know, if we're to really think about some of the things that we're doing here, it just looks like what our local herbal traditional uh, people do. Just spooky stuff, you know. So lots of spooky stuff. Anyway, so today he's trying to make sure that they stick and adhere to the instructions he has given. He said, do not kill animals for sacrifice just out and about in the fields. Make sure you bring it to the tent of meeting, or you will be guilty of bloodshed. So it's not enough to just kill animals. There are certain things that make killing animals so adequate or required for sacrifice, after out of which you are just being wicked. So like people who hunt for fun, like people who just, you know, I feel like this is the same kind of laws that guide when people fight in war, and they say, okay, all is fair in war. So when they are fighting in war, it's not murder, but if you just kill someone out in the streets, it's murder. I feel like it's the same thing. So it says here, do not kill animals for sacrifice in the field. Bring it to the tent of meeting, or you'll be guilty of bloodshed. Do not eat the blood of the animals you have killed, for the life of the creature is in its blood, and blood makes atonement. It's blood that atones. That is why the blood of Jesus. Okay, so let's stick to the scriptures. If you kill an animal, number 3, if you kill an animal, you must drain its blood. So don't eat an animal with its blood. That is why if you see a dead animal, usually its blood is not drained. That's what I think here. So if you eat a dead animal, or an animal that has been torn by wild animals, you will be unclean until evening. And if you're unclean because you ate a dead animal or all of the other things, you must have your bath, you must wash your clothes, and then in the evening you will become clean. I believe that every day that I read this, I'm convinced that these laws were put there. God was trying to help them establish hygiene, establish medical guidelines, like, maybe they're used to eating without washing their hands, so wash your hands. Maybe they didn't think, maybe as slaves they didn't have their bath every day. You need to have your bath every day, wash your clothes, just basically teaching them basic and decent habits. I don't know if like this can be compared to the Ten Commandments, honestly, and I've shared my concerns here that I feel like these are like the second step. The Ten Commandments are like the Ubunge laws, and then Ubunge that's a local slang here for top dog. All right, so we come to the sexual relations now. The list was long. It takes about 25 verses or so. I decided to list all of them out the way I understood. I noticed that some things were conspicuously missing, but let's run through them very quickly. Do not have sexual relations with your mom, with your dad, with your brothers or sisters. I put here your half siblings. In other words, maybe you share a sibling, maybe both of you share a mom or a dad. Do not have sexual relations with that person. Do not have sexual relations with a grandchild. The child of your child is stated there in the Bible. I guess people were doing it. I guess people still even do it. Do not have sexual relations with your step siblings. They are your siblings. So step siblings are like the people that are not really related to you by blood, but maybe their parents are married to your parents, so that makes you guys siblings by marriage. Do not have sexual relations with them. Do not have sexual relations with your auntie. Do not have sexual relations with your uncle's wife. Do not have sexual relations with your daughter-in-law. Do not have it with your sister-in-law. Do not do it with family members. For instance, a man, I saw a picture yesterday, a video yesterday. I didn't know whether it was a joke, whether it was whether it would be, I don't know, whether it was a content for jokes or something, but a mother and a daughter were pregnant for the same man. And we're like, oh, I'm so happy to be pregnant with this, my mom. And the mom is going on talking about her cravings. And she looks honestly, she looks old to me, like beyond childbearing years. So I wasn't really sure if that was real, but that kind of situation, do not have sexual relations with a mom and a daughter. Do not marry two sisters as rival wives. I think that had to be stated here because possibly men were just going on and marrying sister one and sister two, just like Jacob. Jacob actually married two sisters, but here now God is saying don't do it. Do not have sexual relations with a woman during her period. Do not have sexual relations with your neighbor's wife. And do not have sexual relations with the same sex. Then finally, do not sleep with animals. Do not have sexual relations with animals. And it's written here because in all this time, it's assumed, in fact, it's addressed to men, really. That's what I understood. But here it says the woman should not present herself for sexual relations with an animal. So most of what I saw here is that everything here appeared to be addressed to men. In other words, women were not sexually liberated. And today we have all this sexual liberation and women movements and all of that stuff. So it was basically, so some things were conspicuously missing, which I wanted to point out here. I noticed that they didn't address the issue of cousins. Cousins, like, do not have sexual relations with your mother's sister's child. I'll go through it again, but I don't remember seeing anything about cousins. I didn't see any address to uncles. I didn't see any address to nieces and nephews. I want to feel like it's an oversight. Perhaps they didn't describe, they were not described. Maybe they didn't give a name to cousins, nephews, nieces, I don't know, but there are no descriptions for whether or not you're allowed to have sex with them. And so I've seen people who have sexual relations, even marry cousins. So perhaps, but it's not explicitly listed here. So that's what it is. That's our Old Testament reading for today. If you're doing any of it, stop. Okay. I don't want this to be long today, so I want to quickly run through today's lessons. I want to try and keep this in less than 15 minutes every day if I can, or even 10 minutes. Maybe during the weekend, maybe I'll get some people. Let's analyze this together. Okay, so Mark, we're looking at chapter 7:24 to chapters 8. Here we meet Jesus is out and about, doing good, healing people, addressing people, feeding people. Those lots of things that Jesus is doing. So here he meets the Syrophoenician woman, a woman who is from Greece, and she stops him along the way and she says, "My daughter is ill. She's demon possessed, and you need to help her." And then Jesus does something strange. He says, "We can't give the food to the dogs. We can't give the food for the kids to the dogs, And if it's our woke generation, so they'll be offended. Are you calling me a dog? Are you saying that I'm not a kid? I'm entitled to. I'm a human being. Just so basically, what I understood from it was just for saying, look, I'm here for the children of Israel. I'm not a prophet to people from other parts of the world or Europe yet. I'm here to help the children of Israel, bring them back to focus. They are the children. Every other person out there is nobody is righteous before God. So I guess we're all dogs. So Jesus called her effectively a dog. And you know what she does? She says, "Oh, but the dog, the puppies, the little pups can still eat the foods that fall from the table, the crumbs that fall from the table of the children." And Jesus is like, "You're not offended." I mean, that's not what he said, but this is me adding my own now. "Okay, I'm amazed at you. Just go. Your daughter is done. She's healed. Just go. The demon is gone." And that was how Jesus addressed the matter. And I see that courage is a big deal to God. I wrote here that courage is a big deal. The fact that, so this is what she did. She said, "I'd rather have the crumbs that fall from the table, but please let me have something." So it was like Jesus saying, "You're a dog," and she's like, "I'm backing. Woof, woof, woof. I'm not just a dog. I'm a small dog. In fact, I'm a puppy. I still will eat anything that falls off. So please, just anything for me is fine." And Jesus is like, "You're going to have the whole package." I think Jesus is really amazed when people summon up courage to ask for things that are not the norm. And every day I read, anytime I see an issue of courage, I will always try to talk about it. Courage is a big deal to God. If you read through the patriarchs, many of them were not really, really excellent in terms of character and behavior, but they were always courageous. They always took bold steps, and I think that thing is what sets apart many of the people who are listed in the Bible as great men. That's what sets them apart. So Jesus does a few other miracles. He heals a deaf and dumb man. He takes some spooky stuff. He takes sand, puts spittle on it, rubs it, puts it in the man's ears, touches his tongue with him, and then shouts, "Ephata, be open," and the man's ears and his mouth were open. And of course, the man went around telling people, even though Jesus had cautioned him not to tell anyone, he still went around telling. Nobody took Jesus' instruction not to tell other people. They were just yapping all over the place. "Oh, I got healed. Check me out," and stuff like that. Then finally, in the book of Mark today, he also feeds another set of 4,000 people with loaves and fishes. I don't know. I feel like this is another variation of the same story. It's written here as another story, but I feel like it's too identical to have been a different story. But those are my thoughts. I feel like it was probably the same story being captured in another way, and then they just wrote it here, and it was one of the things that were captured here. The person didn't really tell us. He said 4,000, seven loaves here, and some fish. Same meal. Anyway, so I feel like that's just a variation of the original stories of 5 loaves and 2 fishes. The book of Psalms. So let me quickly do my book of Psalms. In summary, the Psalms is saying that God will protect and preserve and deliver anyone who regards the weak, who doesn't abuse or oppress people. He'll be healed and restored from sickness. And then David, I think that David had sinned at this point and was asking for God's help because he was struggling with how he was in sin. And okay, so let me just read it and you hear of it. Then finally, Proverbs chapter 10 verses 15 and 16 says, this is my summaries now: wealth fortifies, but poverty ruins. Righteousness brings life, and wickedness brings punishment. So as I have tried to read, except it's way too long to read, I try to read the book of Psalms. Let me quickly go in. Reading from the NIV, New International Version. Blessed is he who has regard for the weak. The Lord delivers him in times of trouble. The Lord will protect him and preserve his life. He will be blessed in the land. He will bless him in the land. He will not surrender him to the desires of his foes. The Lord will sustain him on his sick bed and restore him from his bed of illness. I said, "O Lord, have mercy on me. Heal me, for I have sinned against you." This tells me that sometimes, some kinds of illnesses as a result of sin. That's what David believes, and yeah, sin means to miss the mark. So yes, I agree. My enemies say of me in malice, when will he die and his name perish? Whenever anyone comes to see me, he speaks falsely while his heart gathers slander. Then he goes about and spreads it abroad. All my enemies whisper together against me. They imagine the worst for me, saying, "A vile disease has beset him. He will never get up from the place where he lies." Even my close friend, whom I trusted, he who shared my bread, has lifted up his heel against me. Et Brute? Literature students. But you, O Lord, have mercy upon me. Raise me up that I may repay them. I know that you are pleased with me. So this is him, even though he has sinned, he's still saying, "Lord, I know that you are pleased with me." That means that we must at all points never wallow in guilt. Like, try to overcome the guilt. I mean, guilt is a natural way of feeling remorseful, but it becomes such that it begins to condemn you as opposed to correcting you. Okay, so verses 10. "O Lord, have mercy upon me. Raise me up that I may repay them. I know that you are pleased with me, for my enemies do not triumph over me. In my integrity you uphold me, and you set me in your presence forever. Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Amen and amen." That's the book of Psalms 41, 1 to the whole of Psalms 41. Proverbs 10, 15 and 16 says, "The wealth of the rich is their fortified city, but the poverty is the ruin of the poor. The wages of the righteous bring them life, but the income of the wicked brings them punishment." What does this tell you? Try to be wealthy. It's a fortified city. So I'll stop here for now, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Share this with those who you think will benefit, and join me. Leave a comment if you like what you've heard, or share a contrary view. I'd be happy to hear it. See you tomorrow.